My name is Clara. I don't know if this story will ever reach anyone, but if it does, heed my warning. Never trust what stares back at you from a mirror. It all began with a rumor, the kind that piques your curiosity even when you know better. The manor stood deep in the woods, untouched by time or trespassers, or so people claimed. As an aspiring interior designer, I couldn't resist. The idea of unearthing forgotten Victorian treasures from my portfolio felt like a golden opportunity. My friend Mia, ever the skeptic, came along reluctantly, more to keep an eye on me than out of genuine interest. The manor was everything I dreamed of and more. Its towering facade, cloaked in ivy and decay, whispered tales of grandeur long past. The inside was a symphony of peeling wallpaper, creaking floorboards, and scattered debris. Sunlight pierced through the shattered windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny ghosts. Then I saw it. The mirror stood in the corner of what might have once been a parlor, obscured by layers of grime and neglect. Its ornate frame, carved with twisting vines and cherubic faces, was stunning despite its tarnish. I felt a shiver of anticipation as I reached out to touch it. "Clara, don't." Mia's voice cut through the stillness. She lingered by the doorway, arms crossed. "This place gives me the creeps." "It's just a mirror," I replied, brushing off her unease. "Think of how gorgeous this will look once it's restored." I pulled an old rag from my bag and began wiping the glass. At first, it resisted, the dirt clinging stubbornly. But as I cleaned, the mirror began to reveal itself, and so did my reflection. That's when I noticed it. The glass was pristine, clearer than any mirror I'd ever seen. Yet, as I stared, something felt off. My reflection smiled at me before I did. I froze, the rag slipping from my hand. "Clara," Mia's voice wavered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. "Just startled myself." But I wasn't startled. I was unnerved. By the next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. When I looked in the mirror at home, my reflection seemed different, sharper, more vibrant. My skin glowed, my hair shone, and my eyes sparkled with a confidence I didn't feel. Mia noticed too. "You've been acting weird," she said over coffee that afternoon. "Weird how?" "Like, you're not yourself. It's hard to explain, but something's off." I rolled my eyes. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Mia." Her expression darkened. "I'm serious, Clara. That mirror." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "You don't understand." I couldn't admit it, not even to myself, but I'd been drawn back to the manor every night since. It wasn't just the mirror's beauty, it was its pull. I felt it calling to me, a silent song only I could hear. Each time I stood before it, my reflection grew bolder. It smirked, winked, even moved when I stood still. And with every visit, I felt stronger, more confident, like I was shedding an old, dull version of myself. But there was a cost. One night, I returned to the manor, the pull stronger than ever. I told Mia I was just going for a walk, but I knew she didn't believe me. She didn't understand, and I wasn't sure I did either. The manor loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. I entered, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The mirror was where I left it, glowing in the dim light. I moved closer, my heart racing in my chest. My reflection smiled at me, but it wasn't the same smile I had seen before. It was darker, more knowing. It beckoned me forward, and I obeyed. My fingers grazed the cold glass, and a thrill ran through me. "Come closer," it whispered. The voice wasn't audible. It was inside my head, smooth and seductive. I stepped closer, entranced, until my fingers met the surface of the mirror. It rippled like water, and before I could react, my reflection grabbed my wrist. Its grip was icy, unyielding. "Clara," it murmured, pulling me in. "Come with me?" I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the cold darkness that enveloped me. I was falling into nothing. The void was suffocating, its coldness wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I tried to struggle, but the harder I fought, the deeper I sank. Shadows danced in the distance, whispering in languages I couldn't understand. I felt like I was being pulled deeper and deeper, farther from the world I knew. And then, just as I thought I couldn't breathe any longer, I found myself back in the manor, standing in front of the mirror. But this time, something was different. The glass was no longer clear. It was fogged like a misty morning. And standing before it was not just my reflection, but something else. Something wrong. It was me, but it wasn't. My reflection was sharper, more beautiful, more confident. It looked at me with a smile that I couldn't comprehend, a smile that didn't belong to me. It tilted its head, studying me. Then slowly, it raised a hand and waved. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My reflection smiled again, a smile filled with malicious intent. I wanted to run. I needed to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The air around me grew thick with a sense of dread. I reached out to touch the mirror, and my reflection moved faster than I could track. It was on the other side, reaching for me. I recoiled, stumbling back, but the reflection followed, always a step ahead. I felt myself fading, disappearing. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my reflection stepping out of the glass, taking my place. And then nothing. The next thing I knew, I was back in the void. But now there was something different. A cold presence lingered in the shadows, watching me. It wasn't alone. There were others, trapped like me, lost in the mirror. I could feel them, feel their eyes on me, their desperation. But I couldn't reach them. I was alone. No, I wasn't alone. I felt it. It was there with me, watching, waiting. The mirror, it waits for new souls. When they arrive, it devours them. It takes everything. Your identity, your life, your very essence. I know now what it wants. It wants more than just to reflect. It wants to consume. And once it has you, it never lets go. I can hear Mia now, calling my name from the other side. She doesn't understand. She doesn't know. The mirror has taken me. I am its prisoner. My reflection, that thing, is out there now, wearing my face, living my life. It smiles and laughs and walks free while I am trapped in this dark, suffocating place. I am the one who is gone now, a fleeting memory in the world outside. The mirror waits, always. It takes and it never releases. Never look too closely. Never trust the reflection staring back at you, because one day it might just decide to take your place. I've always been drawn to the strange and unusual. There's something about rare items, things with histories that I can't resist. I suppose it all started when I found an old coin in my grandmother's attic when I was young. From that moment on, collecting antiques became my obsession. I spent years scouring markets, auctions, and of course, the antique shops hidden away in forgotten corners of London. Most were nothing special, dusty shelves filled with trinkets and knickknacks, but every so often, I found something extraordinary. That was how I came to be standing in the damp, forgotten corner of London in front of an antique shop that I'd never noticed before. The shop looked abandoned, tucked away on a side street, its windows covered in grime. The sign above the door read W.H. Grayson, Antique Curiosities. It had probably been years since it had been open for business, but something called to me. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and I stepped inside, greeted by the musty smell of aged wood and dust. The floor was littered with forgotten objects, some of them piled high, others neatly arranged in dark corners, waiting to be discovered. I walked deeper into the shop, running my fingers across the tops of tables filled with old books, tarnished silverware, and tarnished mirrors. That's when I saw it. In the farthest corner of the shop stood a tall, ornate mirror. Its frame was dark, intricately carved, almost as though it had been designed by someone who had too much time on their hands. Delicate patterns that seemed to twist and turn, climbing the sides of the frame like vines. It was covered in a layer of dust, but there was something about it that immediately drew me in. I took a step closer, admiring the craftsmanship, when a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Ah, I see you found it." I turned to see an old man standing at the entrance of the shop. His hair was thin and silver, and his clothes were outdated, like something out of a bygone era. His sharp eyes seemed to scrutinize me, as though he knew exactly what I was thinking. That mirror, He began slowly, his voice low and deliberate. It reflects more than reality. I frowned, not sure if he was serious or simply trying to sell me some fantastical story. "I'm sorry," I asked, unsure of how to respond. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. "It holds something more than just reflections. Be careful with it." I chuckled lightly, thinking this was nothing more than a tactic to pique my interest. "I'm a collector. I've seen my fair share of oddities. I'm sure this is just a mirror." The old man didn't seem offended by my dismissive tone. He only nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you." I paid for the mirror, eager to get it home and examine it more closely. As I left the shop, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the man's words lingering in my mind, but I shook it off. I had bought many strange items before. Some of them had even been rumored to have strange histories, and I had never experienced anything unusual. This would be no different. That night, I hung the mirror in my living room, admiring its frame and the way it seemed to catch the light. It was beautiful, more stunning than anything I had ever owned. As I stood before it, I thought I saw something move in the reflection, something out of place. But when I turned around, the room was empty. It must have been a trick of the light. Over the next few days, I began to notice strange things. The mirror seemed to reflect shadows where there should have been none, figures standing still just beyond the edge of my vision. I chalked it up to tired eyes or the dim lighting in my apartment. But the more I stared into the glass, the more the reflection seemed off. The shadows grew darker. They lingered too long. It wasn't until the third night, when I was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, that something truly unsettling happened. I was gazing into the mirror when I heard a soft, deliberate knock. I froze. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it or if it was real, but there was no mistaking the sound. Sharp and hollow, like the tap of knuckles against glass. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the reflection, something moved. A figure, no, it was more of a silhouette, appeared behind me. It wasn't my reflection. This figure was different. Its shape was darker, more contorted. It didn't match the soft, warm glow of the room around me. It was something else entirely. Then, without warning, the figure in the mirror raised its hand, knocking on the glass once more. I reached out hesitantly, drawn toward the mirror, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cool surface. The instant my skin made contact, something grabbed me. Cold fingers, sharp and unnatural, closed around my wrist, pulling me forward with an unrelenting force. Panic surged through me as I struggled, but the grip was too strong. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel myself being drawn into the mirror, the world around me shifting as though I were falling into a deep, black void. I screamed, reaching for the edges of the mirror, but the darkness pulled me faster. And then, with a final, desperate effort, I swung my hand back and slammed it against the glass from the inside. The mirror shattered in an instant, the glass cracking and splintering like lightning. I was free, but when I pulled my arm back, shards of glass were embedded deep in my skin. The blood flowed freely, staining my clothes and dripping to the floor. My pulse throbbed in my ears, but when I glanced at the shattered mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My reflection wasn't gone. It was still there, alive, grinning at me with a malevolent smile. The reflection moved in ways that I couldn't. It tilted its head slowly, its eyes locked onto mine with an eerie intensity. And then, as if sensing my terror, it began to step out of the broken mirror. It was me, but not me. It was the thing I had felt lurking in the shadows all along. The thing that had been waiting, watching. The thing that now intended to take my place. I tried to scream, but the words caught in my throat. My reflection reached out, its hand curling around my throat, choking the air from my lungs. And then it spoke, its voice a twisted version of mine. "You're not the one who belongs here," it whispered. "I do." And as it stepped forward, pulling me into the shards, I knew it was over. The last thing I saw was my reflection, grinning, its eyes filled with dark satisfaction. I was trapped in the broken mirror forever.